On June 23rd, the fate of Russia changed, and on August 25th, a plane carrying Yevgeny Prigozhin crashed outside of Moscow. Initially, it seemed that there was a deal between Yevgeny Prigozhin and Vladimir Putin, brokered by Alexander Lukashenko, following Prigozhin's June 23rd mutiny. This deal ensured that Prigozhin would live. However, Wagner would fade into the edges of the Russian Ministry of Defense and ultimately would be swallowed whole. Prigozhin would travel back and forth between Russia, Belarus, Africa, and other places that Wagner had been operating, and while things began to seem quiet, there was the tension left over from the mutiny. It was clear that this would be a temporary peace, and on August 25th, that tension broke. Prigozhin, alongside his deputy Dmitry Utkin and another member of the leadership of Wagner, were all killed in a plane crash outside of Moscow. This effectively leaves Wagner rudderless, with the Russian Ministry of Defense pressuring Wagner fighters to now sign contracts with the Ministry of Defense and ultimately work for the government directly. This now signals the end of the Wagner group. As the world began to receive news that Prigozhin had potentially been killed, Vladimir Putin, perhaps poetically, appeared in front of an orchestra honoring the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Kursk. In a later statement, Putin would say that while Prigozhin had made mistakes, he had died a friend. As I mentioned, Prigozhin was not the only person on the plane. In addition to him and the plane crew, a couple other critical members of Wagner's leadership were also killed. Dmitry Utkin, who was a very extreme ultranationalist and had experience with Russian special forces and extensive experience with combat, was also killed on board the plane. He is someone that you could consider to be a technical expert in Wagner's combat operations, and it's believed that he had spearheaded the Wagner charge towards Moscow during the mutiny. Another member of the Wagner leadership was Valery Chekalov. He is much less known than, say, Utkin or Prigozhin, however, he no less plays a very critical role in Wagner operations. He was considered to be Wagner's logistical mastermind, and that is a significant loss. Consider that Wagner had been operating nearly worldwide. That logistics piece is incredibly important, and so for Wagner to not only lose its head financier, its chief technical expert in its combat operations, and its logistics mastermind, those are pretty key cogs in the Wagner machine that are now gone. With the loss of these three men, Wagner's leadership is effectively decimated. There was an initial outcry from Wagner channels on Telegram, however it's unlikely that anything significant will come of this event, especially in comparison to the June mutiny. While we're just covering the end of the Prigozhin saga, I already have a couple videos covering the beginning and the mutiny, but if you would like a comprehensive video covering all three phases all in one, let me know down in the video comments. So what's next for Russia? Putin has clearly shown now that whether it takes weeks or months, he will get retribution for any betrayal. Prigozhin was not alone, and although it's unclear the extent of the support that Prigozhin was operating from, we can see the effects of Putin's now limited patience whenever it comes to criticism of him, the Ministry of Defense, and the war in Ukraine. As for the war in Ukraine, Russia has shown that it is not going to withdraw anytime soon, and it's in for the long haul. And although it had already withdrawn Wagner from the front lines, it seems that Ukraine will not really see any significant difference in Russian combat power since the impact of Wagner's loss had pretty much already occurred. Monuments, grave sites, and other establishments honoring or paying homage to Wagner have already started to see some forms of vandalism and destruction. Whether these are sanctioned by the government or just independent actions is an open question. There are two other individuals who either have been confirmed to be detained or who may have been detained that are important in this story. Igor Girkin, who was no friend at all of Prigozhin, has been jailed for extremism. And although he recently declared his bid for the presidency of Russia, it's unclear if he's actually going to see the outside of a jail cell again. He does not appear to be linked to the mutiny. However, he has been an open and very vocal critic of the Russian strategy in Ukraine. General Surovikin, who had a relationship with Wagner and Prigozhin prior to the mutiny, appears to have been detained, with family members claiming he's arrested and no one seeing him since the end of the mutiny. He has also been subsequently removed from his previous commands. Command shakeups and political drama is nothing new, especially during a time of war. However, it's certainly not something that you would want to be going through given a large-scale combat operation like what you're seeing in Ukraine. This cuts out Putin's work for the remainder of 2023. In just 6 months, the war in Ukraine will be 2 years old. And in the previous 18 months since the start of the war, Russia has in fact moved further away away from the original objectives they set out in the beginning. With the destruction of Wagner and the killing of Prigozhin, Russia has seen dramatic transformations to its military and its leadership that may set a course that it wasn't on at the start of the war. Putin, likely aware of these circumstances and the challenges ahead, may even become more concerned with the survival of the regime moving forward. Somehow, however, despite all these challenges, Sergei Shoigu and Valery Gerasimov remain exactly where they were before. Despite all that's happened, these two individuals have managed to show a remarkable degree of career survivability, staying in their position despite all the criticism and despite the armed mutiny by Prigozhin that was an attempt to remove them from their positions. And while Prigozhin did not get his wish for ammo from the Russian Ministry of Defense that he had requested, he did ultimately get some ammo, just not in the form that he had originally requested. Russia now sits at an interesting place following Prigozhin's death, and the future of Russia is becoming increasingly more opaque. Putin, now likely on the hunt for an off-ramp to ensure his regime's survival into the future without decimating his image, is finding fewer and fewer options. Let's now take a look at Yevgeny Prigozhin and his origins to see how he went from being Putin's chef to Putin's greatest threat. Until next time.